Hey students, this is lesson 9.4, factoring to solve quadratic equations. We've learned a couple methods, most recently how to use square roots to solve quadratic equations. Now we're going to learn how to factor. Go ahead and do this quick review. You just need to remember how to factor polynomials to do this lesson. All right, an important property we're going to use here is the zero product property. And this makes total sense. For any real numbers a and b, if a times b is 0, in other words, you multiply two things and you get 0, then either a is 0 or b is 0. One of those two things has to be 0. The only way you can get a product of 0 is if you multiply by 0. So here's an example. These two things multiplied equal 0, so that means either this one is 0 or this one is 0. So if x plus 7 times the quantity x minus 2 equals 0, then x plus 7 is 0, or x minus 2 is 0. If x minus 5 times the quantity x minus 8 equals 0, then either x minus 5 is 0, or x minus 8 equals 0. All right, we're going to use that idea to solve. And just think about this for a second. If you know x minus 5 is 0, then you know x equals 5, because 5 minus 5 is 0. If you know x minus 8 equals 0, then you know x equals 8, because 8 minus 8 equals 0. So in this equation, the solutions are 5 and 8. All right, so what we're going to do when we solve using the zero product property is we have two things that are multiplied that equals 0, and here they are. These two things multiplied equals 0. So that means 2x plus 3 is 0. Or x minus 1 must be 0. And that's by that zero product property that we just discussed. Okay, now all we need to do is solve both of those two equations. If we solve this one, so we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. We get 2x equals negative 3. Then divide both sides by 2, and we get x equals negative 1.5. Or, and then we solve this one for 0. This one's pretty easy. We don't need to go through the steps here. What number minus 1 is 0? That's obviously 1. So our two solutions are x equals negative 1.5 or x equals 1. Now just to check that, make sure it works, if I do 2 times negative 1.5 here, plus 3, well that there, right there equals 0. And anything that I multiply by 0 will equal 0. So it doesn't matter what this is. If we put negative 1.5 in there, we get negative 2.5, and 0 times negative 0.5 is 0. Likewise, if we put 1 in here, we're going to get 0 for that factor. And when we multiply by the other thing, it's going to equal 0. So, all right. Go ahead, you try it. I'm going to pause now, and you can check back with your answers. All right, so what are the solutions of the equation x squared minus x minus 12? That's not an equation. Let's make that equal to 0. Well, there's one way we could do this, since this is multiple choice, is just try these numbers. But also, if this was written in factored form, then we can use the zero product property and see the solutions, I think, a little quicker. And this factors pretty easily. We need to think of two numbers that have a product of negative 12 and a sum of negative 1, because this is negative 1x. And those two numbers would be negative 4 and 3. The product of those two numbers is negative 12, and the sum is negative 1. So we can just factor it this way: x minus 4 times quantity x plus 3 equals 0. Well, now that we've written it like that, we can see that x equals 4 to make this factor equal to 0. And we can see that x equals negative 3 to make this factor equal to 0. And so by the zero product property, if x is either that or that, then this product equals 0. So our answer is D. All right, I'll let you try that here. Solve a couple of those. by factoring them and then using the zero product property. I'll pause now and you can check back with your answer. All right, in order to use the zero product property by factoring, we first have to have the equation in standard form. And this equation, you'll notice, isn't in standard form. So the first thing we're going to do is write the equation in standard form. So I'll write it over here. 3x squared plus 13x. And the way I'm going to do that is just add 4 to both sides. Now it's in standard form. And now that it's in standard form, we want to factor this expression. So what we're looking for here is, let me write this down right in standard form. Okay, now we're going to factor the expression. And in this case, we're going to look for two numbers that have a product of 12 and a sum of positive 13. So 12, and that would be 12 and 1. All right, so we're going to use those to help us factor this. And what we're going to end up with is x plus 4 times quantity 3x plus 1 is equal to 0 when we factor it. And now we're going to set both those equal to 0, so x plus 4 is equal to 0, or 3x plus 1 is equal to 0. Solve each of those two little equations there. So here we're using the zero product property. And if we solve this one, we get x is negative 4. If we solve this one, we get x is, I'm going to subtract 1, so negative 1, and then divide by 3. That'd be negative 1/3. All right, then you probably want to check those to make sure they work. And I'll just check one of them. But so what we're saying is 3 times negative 4 squared plus 13 times negative 4. We hope that's equal to negative 4. And negative 4 squared is 16 times 3 is 48 plus 13 times negative 4 is negative 52. And when we add those two, we get negative 4. So that one's true. All right, go ahead, you try a problem like that. And I'm going to pause here. All right, another thing we can do is we can use this idea to solve some problems that we couldn't solve before. So Jason has a patio of uniform width around the perimeter of his rectangular pool. The pool measures 22 by 12. The area of the pool and the patio is 504 square feet, so that would be the whole thing. So what is the width of the patio? So to figure that out, we're going to represent this dimension here as 22 plus 2x, because we're adding x to both ends. And then this dimension here is 12 plus 2x. And then if we multiply those two dimensions, we remember that length times width is equal to area. And our length is 22 plus 2x. And our width is 12 plus 2x. When we multiply those two together, we're going to get 504. Well, we can solve this by using the zero product property if we put this in standard form. First thing we're going to do is multiply this out. And when we do that, and I'm going to switch it around too, but 2x times 2x is 4x squared. Then if I multiply the inners and multiply the outers and add those two together, I get 68x. And then I am going to multiply 12 times 22, and that's 264. And that equals 504. Now to put it in standard form, we need this side to equal 0, so we're going to subtract 504 from both sides. And we get 4x squared plus 68x minus 240 equals 0. Now, one thing I notice here is there's a common factor to everything. There's a common factor 4. And if I divide 0 by 4, that's still 0. if I divide each of these by 4, it simplifies my expression quite a bit. I get x squared plus 17x minus 60 equals 0. And that's a lot easier to factor. I need to think of now two factors of negative 60 that add up to 17, and I think that would be negative 20 and 3. So I can factor this as x minus 20. Hope I got those backwards, don't I? Plus 20 and negative 3. So x plus 20 times quantity x minus 3 equals 0. And to make that equal to 0, x would have to equal negative 20 there, and x would have to equal 3 there. And since we're talking about dimensions here, I don't think a negative dimension will work. So I know that x is equal to 3, and we want to know the width of the patio. The width of the patio is 12 plus 2x, and we know now that x is equal to 3. So 12 plus 2 times 3 is our width, and that's equal to 18. All right, I'm going to let you try one of those. I'm going to pause here, and you can check back with the answers. All right, the lesson check says you're making a rectangular table. The area of the table should be 10 square feet. You want the length of the table to be 1 foot shorter than twice its width. What should the dimension of the table be? Well, if we let x be the width, then the length would be 2x minus 1. Then we can write an equation, length times width. We want that to equal 10. And if I simplify that, I get 2x squared minus 1x minus 10 equals 0 if I put it in standard form. And I can factor that. I get x plus 2 times the quantity 2x minus 5 is equal to 0. And so here x would have to equal negative 2. Well, that's not going to be a reasonable solution for this problem. So I want the solution to this part here. So 2x is equal to 5, so x is 2.5. So the length of the table is 2 times 2.5 minus 1, or 4 feet. And the dimensions of the table are 4 feet by 2.5 feet. All right, that's the end of this lesson. I'll see you tomorrow.